Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webcast entitled PRIMEChat, Better Insights, Better PR ROI. Today's conversation is brought to you by Prime Research Americas and powered by OnStream Media. Cindy Villafranca of Southwest Airlines visits PRIMEChat on January 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time to share her expertise contributing into Southwest's big data analysis for improving communications and businesses' performance. Sharing the session is Mark Weiner, CEO for Prime Research Americas and Chairman of the IPR's Commission on Measurement and Evaluation. Together, Cindy and Mark will explore the ways by which professional communications benefit from research-based communication decision-making. To submit a question or comment at any time during the webcast, please click on the Ask a Question button located below the presentation. Simply type your message into the box and click the Submit button. Alternatively, you could submit your question via Twitter using hashtag PRIMEChat. All questions will be answered at the end of today's presentation. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to today's moderator, Mark Weiner. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Cindy, for participating, and thanks to the audience for joining us. By way of introduction, Cindy is leading one of a very few in-house research practices housed within a communications organization. There's maybe a half a dozen companies that have the capacity and the expertise that Southwest has. That tells me that Southwest invests in measurement, PR measurement and research and evaluation. But beyond applying her expertise to helping make better communication decisions, Cindy's work helps Southwest make better business decisions. We collaborated on a paper last year, a big data paper that's available on the Institute for Public Relations website, www.institute4pr.org. Big data. If you Google that, you'll find it, and you'll see a case study. And I was thrilled to see how Cindy's team is contributing a unique data stream into Southwest big data analysis program to solve real business challenges. So today she'll share more examples. I was impressed with one example because it's rare to see a company do what I was describing even once, but apparently it's a routine at Southwest, and I'm happy to turn it over to Cindy to tell us more. So Cindy, take it away, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining today. So today, as Mark said, I'm going to be talking about amplifying PR measurement and research to ultimately drive business results. So before I jump into the meat of my presentation, really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about who Southwest is, who we are, what we do, kind of why we do it. So these are just Southwest by the numbers. Of course, I live and breathe data and numbers, so you'll see a lot of that in this presentation. We've been in service 47 years. We have 55,000 full-time employees. We serve 110 million customers annually. We have the largest Boeing aircraft. We have the largest fleet of Boeing aircraft in the world, and we just recently put a new aircraft, the 737 MAX, into operation. So we're very proud of a lot of the things we do here at Southwest, and you can see some other tidbits of information here. So while that's a look at the company, I want to also give you a quick look at our communications and outreach department. This shows you that our communications channel strategy and network is very vast. This is not only our channels, but our audiences, and this is strictly from a communications department perspective. This does not include things that our marketing team is doing, from advertising to direct email, direct mail. These are by the numbers from our proactive communication efforts. Doesn't mean marketing doesn't engage with our Facebook fans, that kind of thing, but this just gives you an idea that we have a lot of information and data to analyze here at Southwest. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to talk about today. So measuring your communication efforts, obviously, to help drive business results and impact. Everything I'm presenting today is going to be from a Southwest Airlines perspective, so not all of it will be applicable to your business or may apply to your team. However, I hope there are some nuggets of information or some things that you can glean from this presentation that you can take back to your business or take back to your leadership. So much of what I'm going to focus on today will be around recent crisis incidents or other things that impacted the airline industry and specifically Southwest as a business. They're all very different from each other, but they're all alike in the fact that we took communications data and communications PR research and we used it either on its own or paired with data from the business to help us make quick decisions, to better understand and navigate an unexpected situation, or ultimately, which is what this is about, to make informed business decisions for the company that helped really drive the strategy. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I've broken down the information into 3 case studies that I'm going to present today. And this first case study is around a recent technology glitch that our company had that was impacting our A-list and our A-list preferred customers. For those of you who maybe haven't flown Southwest or don't know much about our business, these are our frequent flyers. That means they're a very important audience for us. They've flown us enough that they have status with our airline. And so just to give you a little bit of background, these customers, as when you're A-list or A-list preferred, part of the perk is that you receive automatic check-in for a flight. And if you've ever flown Southwest, you know that one of our differentiating qualities is that we do not assign seats on our airplane. It's really all about boarding position, which is why automatic check-in is considered a perk for this group, for this tier customer. So for some reason, in last August, this automatic check-in for these specific customers stopped working, and they were not being automatically checked in. And they would not realize that they were not checked in because they were so used to it until they got to the airport. And then by the time they got to the airport, they would receive a very bad boarding position. So you can see on the slide, we had people tweeting about it. They got C60, which, again, if you've flown Southwest, we board A, B, and C group. So if you're in C group, you're getting on the plane fairly late, and you're going to get that dreaded middle seat. So we got alerted to this early one weekend through our listening center, and our listening center is a group of employees who monitor social media conversation at all hours and report out on anything happening. And at first, to be honest, the impact was not that huge, and issues of this type are usually resolved pretty quickly. If it's a technical issue, our team jumps on it and they resolve it. We had moved to a new reservation system, and so the fix didn't happen as quickly as we had hoped for. So as Saturday rolled into Sunday, rolled into Monday, we started to see that many of our A-list customers were returning home from vacations or were leaving out for a work trip, whatever that looked like, and the volume started to increase significantly. So by Monday morning, it was a pretty big issue for Southwest, not only because it was ongoing, but again, you have to remember this was impacting, it was having a negative impact on some pretty valuable customers. So at this point, social media conversation and news media mentions were starting to really pick up speed, which was our first look at metrics where we started to pay attention and say, okay, let's start looking at this situation and find out what's going on. So what we do here in this role is, so in my role in these situations, I jump in and I start analyzing the data immediately. I want to provide quick, consistent readouts and on sentiment, volumes, what are people saying? We look at comments on news articles, on message boards, and we just want to find out really quickly and holistically what's happening. So if you look at what's on the slide, these are just 2 of the reports that we provide to our team and to our executives on the situation, and they are very text-heavy, and that's how they're designed. That's because we want to provide that human analysis, that insight, and those comparisons that make these reports useful to our leaders and executives to help make decisions. They're not the reporting that we're doing on this kind of crisis is not meant to be for presentations. It's really meant to be informational. And in this case, these reports were used by our marketing leadership team to keep a pulse on the situation. They wanted to know, to see how customers felt right then. Should we wait to do any kind of post-flight surveys for these customers? Do we need to analyze how they feel in this situation? The volume and sentiment on these reports were also used by the team to help determine when and if a goodwill gesture should be offered to the impacted customers and what that goodwill gesture should look like. These reports were sent via email, so they were pretty quick and pretty informational. And I will say that this kind of data mining and research is probably the most basic and common type of reporting we do. It's very consistent. It's very in the moment. This is not something where we would use this to provide our most in-depth analysis. It's really just a quick glimpse. As we look at case study number 2, so this is more of an internal crisis that Southwest faced last year, and it's really about looking at the big picture the data can tell. And so while most of our reports, I would say most of our reports do focus on external issues or not even issues, they can be positive, whatever that looks like. Our employees are a key stakeholder in our business. I mean, our employees are a primary audience for us. And it is important to know the pulse of our workforce by listening, monitoring, and measuring. And in this case, our reporting helped our senior leaders better manage and understand what was happening internally. And I'm going to dive deeper into this. So you'll see that it was less about making those quick decisions in the last case study, and it was really more about the perception and if we needed to change perception. So let me give you a little background. In the last few years, Southwest has spent a lot of time in contract negotiations with the unions of many of our operational work groups. And we had a pretty catastrophic technology outage take place in the summer of 2016 that grounded our flights for days and impacted thousands of customers and thousands of employees. And so what happened was the ongoing frustration with our labor negotiations and then the tough operating conditions during that technology outage really took its toll on employee morale. And it got to the point, you can see, where at one point some of the unions were calling for our CEO and other executives to step down. So this internal crisis took on a little bit of an external element in itself. And we understand that employee morale can ebb and flow at every company, but Southwest is really prideful of the fact that we have a really great culture and we have a very high level of employee satisfaction and happiness. So this felt really bad. And our leadership already knew there was turmoil. So it wasn't about that. But what we found was this had all started in 2016, and in early 2017, we were still getting rumblings that employee morale was super low, that it was at its lowest levels we've ever seen, that it had not improved since 2016, and it possibly wouldn't rebound for a long time. So what I did was we take a look at employee morale through manually putting sentiment on every single employee comment on our blog. So while we're a very big business, we still have manual processes in place, and this is one of them, and I can dive deeper into this in a minute. But so what we did was I go into our blog and I count up every single comment that comes in, and I assign a sentiment to it, positive, negative, or neutral. And so my communications VP, she knew, based on some of these reports I provided her that were small snippets of information, she knew that employee morale was actually coming back to normal levels. But what we hadn't looked at we hadn't looked at the big picture. We hadn't looked at the data holistically across a broader time frame. And that's the chart you're seeing here on the screen. So what we did was we took a look at employee sentiment from our internal blog across the entire year of 2016. And what we found was during the summer, employee sentiment, the negative comments and the declined comments, which we have a moderated blog situation on our internal blog, it was really bad. We saw a huge spike in the negative comments and the negative sentiment. So we knew it was bad in the moment. What we noticed when we started to visualize the data this way was, yes, we had a huge spike in negative comments, but if you'll notice where the arrow is, we didn't have a huge dip in the positive comments. So then we did a little bit more research and found that there were employees commenting on our blog posts that had never commented before. There was, this grassroots effort almost among employees to go out and voice their opinion in this specific moment in time. So what happened was my leader took this data and this information into her meetings and allowed all executives to see the broader picture, which was it was really bad during the summer months. But if you look at this graph, you'll see that actually employee morale rebounded in the September-October timeframe. And as a matter of fact, by the end of 2016, our positive comments were fairly high. So it just kind of helped change perception in a situation where it felt really bad, but in reality wasn't as bad as we had thought. So let's skip on to the last case study. This is a crisis that truly redefined the airline industry, and in terms of reputation, it changed our benchmarks, and it really just, I can't even say it again, it really changed everything about our industry. So it changed the meaning of viral for us. And the thing about this is when it started, Southwest really had nothing to do with it. Unfortunately, I'm talking about the United Airlines incident where the passenger was dragged off an overbooked flight and forcibly removed from the plane. It happened in April of last year. It went viral very quickly. It resulted in more than 50,000 news mentions and 1 million social media posts for our industry. And nearly 600,000 of those alone were for United. So you can imagine the vast amount of data that we were looking at. And as this unfolded, it was not ultimately about Southwest. We wanted to keep our eye on it because it was impacting our industry, and it was growing to epic proportions. And it just, as with any industry, you always want to pay attention to what's going on. So, as it unfolded, Southwest did not insert ourselves in the conversation at all. However, we were inserted in the conversation by a very creative person who decided to come up with a ad that said, Southwest, we beat the competition, not you. We had nothing to do with that, but it was getting shared across all kinds of channels in the social space. It was getting picked up by media who was asking if that was us, and it was just all of a sudden we are now part of this story when we were not part of that story in the beginning. We fielded numerous media inquiries, again, on this one piece of made-up artwork. So now also, too, another element to the overbooking story was that a few weeks prior to the United incident, the 2016 industry-wide overbooking stats had come out relatively quiet and had flown under the radar and had not generated very much coverage. That was good for Southwest because that report showed that Southwest actually had the highest overbooking rate of any other airline, literally 2 times that of United. And all of a sudden, we are now part of the conversation because that report was now being brought to light again because it had just come out. So we were a big focus of the second wave of news media and social media stories around this crisis. That, again, didn't even start out as a Southwest crisis. So ourselves, along with many other airlines, we faced a lot of criticism around overbooking. In fact, executives from all major airlines had to testify in front of Congress regarding overbooking policies. So let's be realistic. This was no longer a United crisis at all. It was an everybody crisis. So if you look at this chart, what I'm showing you here is just the volume and decline in sentiment that Southwest saw in the 2 weeks following the United incident. So this is just a comparative look at 2 weeks before the incident and 2 weeks following the incident. Our news media mentions grew nearly 200%. Our social media mentions grew 500%. Southwest and the mention of overbooking grew a phenomenal 12,000%. Strong increase in negative sentiment. Again, this had become a reputational risk for us, just as much as it had for United, who was actually involved in the incident. So in terms of the communication measurement and reporting that happened during this period, it was very fast-paced, it was very high level, and there was just no way to dive into all the volumes we were seeing. They were so large and they were so overwhelming. So what happened was the story continued to evolve. We provided initial reports of the incident. We were mining as much data as we could. It just kept going and going. So we provided weekly reports. We provided coverage reports, volume, sentiment analysis, anything we could do, we were providing it to our senior leaders and our executive leadership as well. And as this unfolded, it became very clear to all of us that this could have happened to anyone. It happened on a United plane. It could have happened to anyone. And ultimately, this became a larger conversation among our executive team and other teams that provided data around this on how ending overbooking would impact our revenue, impact our flight loads, what was the communications data showing from a reputation/sentiment standpoint. And so, of course, we decided to end overbooking on Southwest. We made that judgment call from a business decision to say everything that happened in this situation, we need to end overbooking, and that's what we did. In this incident, it was very hard to assign a quantifiable value to reputation, but interestingly enough, in this case, you might recall that United stock dipped $1.4 billion the day after this incident went viral. And so that's a very real number to our reputation, and that's where that data helped drive us to make the decision to end overbooking. So the data that communications and PR and the research we did, it was married with other data throughout the business to help our executives come to this decision. I have no doubt that the thought to permanently end overbooking on Southwest would have come. That decision wasn't made just because of the data we provided, but it was the whole holistic picture of our data married with other data. How would this impact revenue? What would it do? So, and months later, the decision to end overbooking showed up again in the news media when the DOT announced that forced passenger bumping had nearly diminished in the airline industry. So again, it just continued to unfold. Win-win. This was very positive coverage for us because we had decided to end overbooking. So really quickly, let me talk about why all the case studies I talked about are very valuable and in the moment, and they focus on enabling our executives to stay abreast of changing situations and empowering our business to act more quickly and analyze situations. We also, often after a situation, we go back and apply this data in a holistic way. So what I'm saying here is that we track this information over time because it helps us really understand how bad is something really. It helps us to answer, is it even a crisis? So what we do, I keep a running spreadsheet of volumes of mentions for everything that happens in our business. It goes back years. And we can say, this was really bad. Does this feel bad? Is it bad? What do these volumes look like? So it's our own benchmark for ourselves. We also have our reputation score through the Reputation Institute that we pay close attention to over time. So what I'm trying to say here, long-term reputational analysis and benchmarking is very important as part of all this reporting and analysis for any company. So no presentation would be complete without going home with some key takeaways. The one thing I've showed you a ton of data and information, and I've given you some insight into how we use PR results to influence business impact at Southwest. There is a lot more that goes into this, and I hope you have some questions, and I hope we can answer some of those questions. But the one thing I can't stress enough is that human analysis and the human element to measurement is a must. I'm not saying that because it's job security, which it is, but I don't really feel like there is any tool or database that does it perfectly, especially when the volumes are so large that the sentiment could be skewed or the conversation could be skewed. So I think human analysis is a must. And then data for the sake of data isn't very useful. So I always like to tell a story with the data. Make it visual, make it impactful, make it insightful. A good data story can separate the perception from the reality. And if you're trying to build a case for why communications is important to your business, quite frankly, give them data during a crisis that helps them make an informed decision. And bottom line, if they can make an informed decision based on data, then it's probably going to come out pretty well. And lastly, while you may avoid a crisis situation in your business, it's important to pay attention and monitor your industry. I think we all probably know that, but it doesn't take long for you to become involved in an industry crisis, and communications data can help you determine when or if it's important to respond, especially in a crisis that could potentially impact you, like the United incident. So that's it for me. I went through that very quickly, so I hope we have some questions. Thank you again, and Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Great. And I invite everybody to submit your questions via the portal. And if I could just begin by making an observation, I appreciate the emphasis you've placed, Cindy, on the need for context within the research process. So I see you're providing context like with the internal, like the employee attitudes. You're looking at trends over time, and only when you saw the trend over time could you see what was happening in that, at that one particular time. You also showed trends over time as a way to benchmark overall performance that, you can track your own performance over time. You look at industry trends, so not just tracking Southwest, and not even just select competitors, but the industry overall. And based on what happened, you might be also tracking regulatory issues that affect the airline industry. So it's broad-based, and so you're bringing an extra level of understanding for those people who receive these reports. You're also comparing your media analysis, social and traditional media, as you've shown here, with other data streams for communication and reputation, like the Reputation Institute, who use surveys as their measurement instrument. So I derive that from your presentation, the commitment to providing context and the need to commit over time so that these patterns reveal themselves and the insights are available when you need them. Without the larger context, it might have been harder to see what was really happening with employees if Southwest had not made the commitment, a year ago or 5 years ago to understand what was happening in that moment. So I just want to recognize that. If you want to comment, that's great, but I have some questions for you too.
Awesome. No, I think that was very well said, Mark, and absolutely, being able to look at any data over time is super insightful. So I completely agree with you and would love to answer some questions.
Okay, so here's one. From the audience, I'm just going to read it verbatim, okay?
Okay.
Did you leave behind the human touch on measurement of tone and then return to it, or have you always done the monitoring as you described it today? So did you have to kind of learn a lesson that automation didn't work well enough and then you came back to human validation?
No, that's a really great question. So we use automated animation for news media and social media. We did a analysis of that automated sentiment and found that there's a margin of error in social media of 25 to 30%. That's a pretty big margin of error. So we do automated animation for our external. From an internal perspective, when we talk about employee sentiment, our current system does not use natural language processing or anything else to do sentiment, so we are forced to do it manually. However, when you look at the margin of error externally and my margin of error internally, which I would say is probably less than 2 to 3%, I am very confident in my analysis of internal sentiment, where I am not as confident sometimes with external and have to dive deeper into, what are people saying? Is this sentiment really true? That kind of thing. So that's a really great question. I like automated sentiment. I think it can give you a quick view of a situation, but you have to be very cautious with it.
Understood. So the human touch at what I'll call the coding level, like sentiment or the presence of an intended or unintended message is one thing, but the ability to derive actionable insights is a human endeavor in any case. So no matter what the technology does, it still requires someone like you or a data scientist who can use the tool, who can bring industry expertise, corporate communications expertise to this equation, and then has the ability to work with data and to bring critical thinking to the data to come up with something that's insightful. I think that's like the Venn diagram of those three things: tools, category expertise, and statistical acumen and critical thinking. You bring those three things together as you have, and then you have something. And I think most of that is human. 2 out of 3 of those things are human. The tool is only one part of it. I think there's sometimes some confusion because tool marketers make claims about insights, and I think they might make insights easier for a human, for a real data scientist like you, to uncover, but I don't know that they actually produce insights.
I agree.
Thank you. Okay, so here's one, and I'll give you an opt-out if this is proprietary information. But here's the question from the audience. For context, I am just curious, what percentage of your PR budget is granted to analytics and insights? Thanks.
Yeah, Vendor, that's a great question, and I'll answer this the best I can. We do have a large communications team here at Southwest, so we're lucky. We have 2 full-time dedicated measurement and data people, for lack of a better word, data scientists that are in communications, myself and one other. So from a tools perspective, though, so when we look at the budget, I don't have a percentage right off the top of my head. I haven't done that lately. From a tools perspective, we also, to help with budgeting constraints or whatever, we will team up with other departments and say, hey, we're purchasing this social media monitoring tool. It might be really valuable to our customer insights team or to our marketing team. Would you guys like, to go in together to purchase this tool? So we found that to be very successful. The tools are expensive. They are pricey. And again, I don't have right off the top of my head the percentage of that measurement is from our budget. It's definitely not the largest. It's a very small slice of the pie. However, we've just tried to be very strategic in how we go about funding some of the things that we do here. On that, I would say that like I said, we have an in-house team, and we have grown that team. So when I first started at Southwest, it was just myself. And as the demand grew, our leadership saw the value in this, and they decided to add more money to it. So I think it's important to get your senior leaders and your senior team on board to show them the worth, and then beg, borrow, and steal, for lack of a better word, to get the tools and people that you need.
That is excellent advice, and it's a great segue. So what I take from what you just said is that it's better to begin simply than to better to begin simply than to not begin at all. So when it was, before there was you, there was something. They recognized the need for someone like you, and then as you continue to demonstrate the value of this investment, that the money was being well spent, more investment came to it. I can offer a comment to that question, just speaking generally, because I've seen like opinions published or online or in the PR trades, this notion that 10% is the right number for research. In fact, PR Week, like 12 years ago or 15 years ago, dedicated a whole year to 10% for research. It was like a big push that they had at the time. And but when people ask me that question, what should I spend? What percentage should I spend? My answer is always, it depends. If you're introducing a breakthrough product, something really, really breakthrough, and it, 10% for PR may not be enough. If PR is going to be the lead, as it sometimes is for breakthrough products, where you're creating, momentum through media. So in those cases, 10% may not be enough. On the other hand, for a dying brand, where a company might just be milking that brand, they're not investing in that brand anymore. I'm thinking consumer products, like no reformulations. It sells. It doesn't cost us, still makes money, just doesn't make much. 1% might be too much. So it really depends on what the objective of the program is, of what the objectives of the research are, and what the objectives are for the communication. But I want to focus on another aspect of what you were describing, because what you've described so far is getting to a place where everybody in public relations wants to be, which is at the table, getting a seat at the table. Because it's just not as common as it ought to be, at least, in the opinion of most PR people, because people, we want to be at the table. How does, I think you've given us 3 good examples, but what role has PR research played, not just in winning a spot? So at some point, people started to pay attention to the research because it started to help make better business decisions. And then, so what role does research play in winning and then retaining a seat at the table?
Yeah, that's a good question.
For your manager, for research and for the communications executives to whom you report.
Yeah. So I'm going to start down one trail here, and then I'll get to your question. So I want to say that to what you said earlier, Mark, we started small at Southwest. I go back and look at some of the things we were doing 5 years ago, and they are small compared to the things we're doing today, because times have changed. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, it's constantly evolving, and they're constantly growing. And so I think as the communications channel strategy and how we communicate grows, I think that has helped get us a seat at the table. And I say that because what happens is it's the way of the world. So everyone's going on to Twitter to voice their opinions or to talk about Southwest or whatever that looks like. And communications was the one at Southwest, in our business, communications was the one that had access to that channel, so to speak. We were the ones who had the analytics. And so what I did was I was very, what's the right word? I would say almost annoying. I educated my own communications team on the things I could do for them from a measurement research perspective. And then I asked them to take that back to their internal clients. And as their internal clients started seeing the results of their campaign, so it's not always negative. Sometimes it's positive. Or they started seeing that, we were getting 20% of all airline industry conversation on any given day was about Southwest. Well, what were people saying about us? They wanted more insights. The more little nuggets that I gave them, the more they thrived for that information. And so what I did was, as I educated my own team, I was getting, it was kind of, filtering out to other parts of the business, and they started to see what communications had to offer and what we could bring to the table. One of the things that, one of the projects I've worked on for a long time was we do a very large sale every year in the summer, in the spring, and the fall. And I was providing them information to my internal team. I was saying, look how great this sale is doing, and they started funneling that to other members of the business, and then I started getting inviting to those meetings to provide that insight. So I would say, depending upon how your business is structured, it's almost like have your team be your advocates, go to their internal clients, present that information. But again, it depends on your business. If you can show them value in whatever way that is, however that looks for your business, that will bring you to the table, I believe.
Excellent, thank you. Now, one of what you were describing in your case studies is really rare in my experience. I've been doing this for 30 years, and the fact that you're doing it so routinely is even rarer, that you're making these connections. So you've described your interaction within the communications team and how you enable them and yourself to interact with, like, the C-suite when it comes to these big decisions. Can you describe a typical interaction that you have with other research groups within Southwest? So, because you're bringing data, to one another. You're integrating data from what I've seen and what you showed today. How does that go? And where does that process begin, I wonder?
Yeah, so really great questions. I oftentimes am interacting with our customer insights team a lot because we have access to Reputation Institute data, which, as you mentioned, is done by surveys. Well, our customer insights team is also surveying our customers, and after they take a flight, they'll send out a survey, and it'll ultimately end up with our NPS, our Net Promoter Score. I love to take a look at various data points that we are collecting through customer insights with reputation, or various data points from NPS with, what does our media quality look like? So I often just do it myself. I'll say, hey, we should go talk to this team, or we should go talk to this team to make some correlations, to make sure things look the same. We also are lucky at Southwest that my leader, Linda Rutherford, she lives and breathes measurement. She gets it. She's an advocate for it. She is smart about it. I can't say enough great things. So when she is sitting in meetings, she is also an advocate for me and my colleague, and will say, oh my gosh, they can provide this information, or they have this information, or they know this, or she will do, it's a two-way street. So she'll tell people about us, but then also too, she'll funnel information to us and say, oh, you should go talk to this person, or did you know that we have a whole data science team, and if not, you should be a part of it. So I feel like it's going to sound super elementary and maybe even over-repeated, but I feel like it's making sure your executive and your managers and your leaders get measurement, they understand what it is you do, they are educated about it, and that they're also being an advocate for you. And
good advice.
Was there another part to that question, Mark? I'm sorry.
Yes, you did. And it's a reminder, I think, to everybody that, well, I'm going to say it's a reminder that there's a need to reinforce the need for research. And in a way, you're constantly selling the concept. And I have to believe, given the case studies you have and the number of case studies you have, that the selling gets easier and easier once you have these cases that show these kinds of results. So success breeds.
It almost does it itself. Mm-hmm.
And I suppose also it starts to sell itself. But I think also I think it might incite curiosity. Like, what more can it do? So you have all these great case studies. People may start to think about communications research applications in ways that they might not have. So you you contributed to that big data paper, and in that paper you offered a case study in which your data was used, your PR data was used to help Southwest, to improve Southwest's Net Promoter Score, which was directly related to on-time performance.
Yes.
And I think that's a story, if you don't mind sharing it,
yeah.
Because I'll just set it up this way. And so I hope this is your version of your story, because this is my version of your story, as I remember it. Is that there was some issues with on-time performance. The company assembled like an engineering a team mm-hmm. comprised of engineers and finance people, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So take it from there. But together they could not close the loop as to why on-time performance couldn't be better, and they couldn't adequately explain why on-time performance wasn't what it could be. And then you entered the picture.
Yeah, so that's a great one. So we, on-time performance at Southwest Airlines is directly related to our Net Promoter Score. We start to see that when our on-time performance is bad, our Net Promoter Score dips significantly. There is a direct correlation between those two. What happened is we used to be really good in on-time performance, and as our network grew and as our business grew, we started to see our on-time performance numbers slide along with our Net Promoter Score. So what happened was there was a lot of people that were talking about this and how do we improve it and what can we do, and so it finally branched out to other areas of the business where they were trying to collect as much data they could to figure out what was going on. And what communications provided them was a look at news media mentions around on-time performance and social media mentions, so that the average conversation of a customer in on-time performance. And what they found was we were having a lot of problems getting our what we call originator flights out of the gate on time. And that's really an interesting thing because our originator flights are the ones that are the first ones of the day. So there's the plane's there, everything should be good to go. There's really nothing that should be delaying those flights. So what we were seeing is social conversation of people saying, the plane's here, we're sitting here, our flight's delayed, there's no weather, what's going on? So we provided that insight to them. And ultimately what happened is that core group of people that were looking at this came up with our data, married with other data, found that it was a result of those originator flights. And when the first flight of the day is late, it impacts the rest of the day. And so they started a program to get those originator flights out of the gate on time, and it ultimately, our on-time performance improved. And so that was just a very small nugget of information that communications provided, but it offered them insight that they didn't have before.
Pretty amazing. So if you had a single piece of advice to somebody who's just getting started, what would you suggest?
So I get the question a lot when I'm speaking I get the budget question a lot. I get the what's your toolbox look like question because, a lot of people, budgets are different and tools are expensive. My advice would be if you're in this space already, educate as many people as you can about why measurement and analytics and research is important, specifically from PR communications. If you're not in this space or you're really struggling to get in this space, there's a lot of free tools out there. I still rely on, as elementary as it sounds, I rely on Google Alerts to really let me know when something's starting to bubble up. I have them come in as they happen. They're reliable. The other thing I would say is in social media, most of the platforms these days have really great analytics as part of the platform. We use Facebook Analytics. We use Twitter Analytics. So I find it interesting when people tell me that they don't have the tools because I think the tools are out there. Where I think there's the bigger problem is the bandwidth or the manpower. And I just said it, human analysis is a must. I understand that not everyone has that, but even a small amount of time dedicated to it, maybe you start with an hour, whatever your job would allow or your coworkers' jobs would allow. Maybe you start small and then build from there. It's just like with anything else. If you don't find importance in it and dedicate resources to it, it probably won't get done.
Well said. Well said. Wonderful. Well, somebody asked a question. You actually answered it in your own organic way in answering my question. The question is, if we wanted to find out the companies who offer these tools, what should we search for online? So you mentioned Google. Just Google Alerts is one way to. What would you suggest?
Yeah, so we have a whole suite of tools. I say this a lot too. So if anyone has heard me speak before, I have yet to find one tool that does it all. So we have a media monitoring tool. We have a social media monitoring tool. We have a tool that monitors our internal. When I say monitors, it basically is one that just does page views, all that kind of thing. There is a plethora of tools out there. I would recommend knowing what it is you want to accomplish before you go out searching for tools, or you will be overwhelmed. So in other words, sit down, come up with what your measurement strategy is. We want to know what's happening in social versus what's happening, or in addition to what's happening in news media, and then go after a tool that will do that. Also, understand the metrics that you want to bring in. There's vanity metrics, which people, I feel like, often get pushed to the side, but I think they're important in the sense that they offer you the benchmarks sometimes that you need, the volumes, but then it's the insights and what can you glean from a tool, especially if you don't have a dedicated person, then you may want to look at a tool that has the capabilities to give you some of these insights more, quote, automated than another tool. So I think it's really talking through what your measurement strategy, your research strategy is before you start talking to vendors, because I think that vendors will sell you more than you need potentially, or less than you need. So, well,
if I can offer this up, nowadays when I Google, I just put in my question. What's the best best free social media tools? There are, if that's what you're looking for, or. There's lots of evaluations. There's many of these companies that offer. I think almost every company offers some form of tool.
Absolutely.
My company does, but we don't. But we're more like the category is called software as a service. That's SaaS. But and we're more of a service with software, but. Our parent company, Prime's parent company is Cision. They have these scalable solutions, so that's one place to search. But I think you can Google exactly what you want, and as Cindy was saying, just describe what you want, put it in the search bar, and hit the button, see what comes up. There's no shortage of tools, for sure. And
there's no shortage of tools, and I could recommend a vendor, I could recommend a tool, but it's really what is beneficial for your business and what is going to help you draw the insights and get the information you need for your executives, your team, your programs, whatever that looks like.
I'll make you bet that there's probably an article written, probably a very helpful article. If you Googled, how do you choose the best communications tool or social media monitoring tool or something like that, and I'll bet you, or the questions to ask when selecting the best monitoring tool or something, I'll bet you that article exists, and that would be the way to go.
I believe that Katie Payne has written an article like that. I don't know if it's showed up on IPR or some of the other measurement organizations, but if you Googled that, you would definitely, I'm sure, find it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought of her. I thought of Katie too. So anyway, how to choose the best monitoring tool, or how to select the best monitoring tool, or something like that. Anyway, so that is. Hang on. Okay, there's one late question. Are there courses, Cindy, you would recommend to help communicators learn to analyze data and pull out the story?
Courses, there probably are. It depends on if you want to pay for them. I believe that there are a ton of great resources, meaning Institute for Public Relations has great resources. Katie Payne, the Measurement Advisor, is a newsletter. It's a great resource. Help me out, Mark. I know there's just tons of information. The Association for the Evaluation or for Measurement and Evaluation of Communications, AMEC, it's a great resource. So I'm happy to share all those things. I feel like if you Google any of this information, you will be driven. But Institute for Public Relations is a good one. AMEC is a good one. Katie Payne is a good one. What are some other ones that I'm missing?
The one that I write, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Prime Research is a good one.
I'm teasing you. So at the university level, mm-hmm. I think universities have begun to recognize that data science is an emerging part of communication.
Yeah.
I just spoke yesterday at University of Florida, at Gainesville.
Yeah, University of Florida has a great program, and it's an online program. Mm-hmm.
So there's those online programs that are convenient, less expensive, and they focus on communications research. And there's, I don't know, like 6 or 7 or 8 of those mm-hmm. that you can get credit for and everything. Otherwise, free resources through the Institute for Public Relations and AMEC are good suggestions. That's what I would suggest. But I think that, generally speaking, PR people know how to tell a story. It's just a tweak on what you're used to, and that is telling the story based on data, just in the same way you tell a story for your client or your company. So we're at the end of our time. I want to thank you again, Cindy. I want to thank everybody for joining. And join us next month for PRIMEChat with Alan, well, a guest speaker, whose name just Alan Kelly. Always controversial, provocative, but interesting too. So I wish everybody goodbye. Thank you for joining, and we'll speak to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Bye.
Thank you. This does conclude today's conference. We thank you for your participation. You may disconnect your lines at this time and have a wonderful day.